Every now and then, the lectionary puts what might be called a hard saying by Jesus before us and asks the preacher to make sense of it in a 12-minute sermon. And that is the situation today. For in just a few verses, Jesus speaks of bringing fire to the earth, causing division within families, and recognizing the signs of the time. And in the next few minutes, I'll be doing my best to make sense of it. About fire. Late one night, when I was an active call firefighter with the Lebanon Fire Department, we went out to a reported structure fire in the deep of winter. I was seated in the back of the engine along with another call firefighter who had recently moved to Lebanon. He told us he had plenty of experience with another department. As we approached the fire, the order came back that we were to put on our air packs and prepare to enter the burning building. As we began our preparations, I heard him say to another firefighter, "You take my place. I can't do it." Later, we learned that he wasn't as experienced as he claimed, and he wasn't ready to face the fire of a burning building. So he wisely turned back from entering the fire. Most firefighters are anxious to go into the fire. When there is a fire to fight, they want to be inside the building where the action is. That's where their calling is. That's where their training is put to good use. Garth Brooks captures the sentiments of most firefighters when he sings, "Standing outside the fire, life is not tried, it is merely survived if you're standing outside the fire." And Brooks captures something of the meaning of Jesus' puzzling words, "I came to bring fire to the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. I have a baptism with which to be baptized, and what stress I am under until it is completed." Frustrated with the injustices of this world, stymied in his efforts to bring peace to a troubled people, longing to set the world free of sin and evil, Jesus says he's anxious to bring the fire of God's judgment to earth. Not that the world is to be punished with fire, but that the world is to be set free from evil and sin by fire. Yet even as he says this, he understands that some will walk with him toward the fire, recognizing in the fires of judgment the hand of God, but most will turn away from it and toward that which they have known and that in which they are comfortable. I came to bring fire to the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled, Jesus says. But then he says, "Do you think that I have come to bring peace to the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division." We had just driven into our driveway on that 4th of July evening, opening the door of our minivan to help our sleepy children get out and into the house. I heard in the distance a loud bang, and moments later, the zing of a small rocket going by my legs under the car, narrowly missing the open door of our van and the children sitting inside. Seeing that the children were safe, I myself took off like a rocket toward the group of young men down the street that were setting off their fireworks. Seeing me coming, most of them scattered. To this day, I'm amazed that I could so frighten these strapping young men that they would flee. But the two who remained were deeply apologetic. Again and again, they said they were sorry for endangering our family. It had been an accident, they said. The rocket exploded horizontally rather than going up into the air. And I recall that episode from long ago vividly, and even today can feel a surge of emotion thinking about it. Like every parent of young children, I worried about their safety and went to great lengths to see that they were kept as safe as possible. They're now in their 40s, and one just turned 50, and through confession, I still worry about them and hope that they're safe and well and happy. And family is near and dear to all of us, I suspect. We cherish them as much as we cherish life itself. And Nirmala and I especially enjoy it when they all gather at our home, when their laughter and delight in being together fills our house with joy. We love our families. So today's reading from the gospel is bewildering. Jesus says, "Do you think I've come to bring peace to the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, 5 in one household will be divided, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. Father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law." Tough words from Jesus on this pleasant summer Sunday. The Jesus we thought we knew, the kind, compassionate, loving healer of those beset by illness, the rescuer of sinners who have fallen. This Jesus seems to have vanished, and in his place comes one anxious to get started on a mission that he sees as divisive and contentious. Where has this Jesus come from? He's been there all along, of course. We saw him calling disciples, inviting them to leave their fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters, their place in the family business, going contrary to the social customs and norms of the day. He invites them to separate from their families and join him in a healing and nomadic ministry. We heard this Jesus callously say when told that his mother and brothers were waiting to see him. My mother and brothers are those who hear God's word and do it. We have heard this Jesus speaking at length of a great judgment wherein the entire human family will be divided like sheep from goats, some sent to punishment and others to reward, and their judgment based upon how they treated people who were hungry, thirsty, naked, or in prison. For a time, we thought this Jesus was the kind of religious figure we were comfortable with, someone we could sit down and have a beer with. But then he started talking about fire, about dividing families. We wondered where that was coming from. Like many families, my siblings and I can only get along if we don't talk about religion and politics. Raised in the same home by the same parents, attending the same church led by the same preacher, who was my father, and all of us in some measure still practicing our faith, we've come to see Jesus and understand his gospel quite differently. Thus, our response to current affairs and to the news is very different. My siblings tend to see the current political moment as something for which to give praise to God, while I see it as a movement that is profoundly offensive to the values of my God. So we are a divided family who can only talk about grandchildren, cars, our ailments, and what's for dinner. We all see ourselves as followers of the Christ, but our interpretation of the faith and its application to today's complex problems divides us. So in a strange way that none of us could have imagined, the identity of the Jesus of the gospel lies at the heart of our division within our family. In his book, Laughing Out Loud and Other Religious Experiences, author Tom Mullen says, and I quote, "I learned upon joining the Quakers that they attack large social and moral problems with conscientious determination. They work for peace. And if you really want to cause conflict, work for peace." The late Archbishop Dom Helder Camara once said, "When I give bread to the poor, they call me a saint. But when I ask why the poor have no bread, they call me a communist." More than a few of the saints of the church have found that following the gospel can be very dangerous. Think of Archbishop Oscar Romero, a forceful advocate for the poor of El Salvador, shot down by members of his nation's armed forces while celebrating Eucharist with his people. Think of the many good people working in dangerous parts of the world, suffering and dying even as they bring food and medical care to the most desperate of Earth's people. On our way here this morning, we heard in the news a report of bombs falling on a warehouse storing baby formula, destroying the formula and killing the aid workers in that warehouse. Good people working in dangerous parts of the world. Recall with me the lyrics of Smokey Robinson's Abraham, Martin, and John, and the refrain, quote, "Now didn't you love the things they stood for? Didn't they try to find some good for you and me?" And the line that repeats throughout the song, "I looked around and he's gone." The followers of Jesus quickly learn just how dangerous and divisive his gospel can be. And finally, about paying attention. Jesus says to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising in the west, you say immediately it's going to rain. And so it happens. And when you see the south wind blowing, you say, it'll be a scorcher. And it happens. You hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of earth and sky, but why do you not know how to interpret the present time? You may remember me telling you about my weather vane. Situated atop my garage is an old weather vane shaped like a fine-looking dog. In the 17 years we've lived in our house, the weather vane has faithfully pointed to the east. No matter the weather, from hot, hazy, humid summertime to wintry northeasters, the weather vane steadfastly, faithfully points to the east. It is a fine-looking instrument, but not being very sensitive to the movements of the wind, it isn't very good at being a weather vane. Fortunately, I have other ways of knowing what the weather will be. Each morning I read the newspaper and check it for the forecast. I want to know what to expect, especially when the potential for a storm is present. Like the crowds in Jesus' time, I'm good at weather, not so good at interpreting the signs of the times. Though I regularly read the newspaper and endeavor to stay current, abreast of current events, I cannot discern what God is doing, where God is going. Reading the signs of the future is not something I'm very good at. So I have some sympathy for the crowds Jesus was talking to. Matthew Skinner, a professor of New Testament at Luther Seminary, in the Working Preacher podcast, suggests that Jesus is saying to the crowds that their world is in spiritual crisis and they can't see it. This isn't a time, Skinner continues, Jesus saying, for playing it safe, for living in your comfort zone. And Rolf Jacobson, an Old Testament scholar speaking in the same podcast, adds, the world isn't going to change itself, so Jesus has to enter in and bind the strong man, a way of talking about overcoming the forces of evil. Thus, our Gospels record, Jesus walks toward Jerusalem and to the events of Holy Week. His disciples will try to stop him. They're not comfortable going along with him. The authorities will threaten to arrest him. But step by step, Jesus walks toward the fire. So where does that leave us, we the modern followers of Jesus? What are we to do while the risen Christ tackles the many evils which grip our world? And echoing Jesus' advice to another crowd recorded in Luke chapter 3, in another time in conversation, I suggest the following. If we are firefighters, we must gear up for the task of fighting fires that we encounter in our lives. If we are healers, we must put together our black bags of medicine and bandages and set about the task of bringing healing to those in need. If we are counselors or pastors, we must open our ears to hear of human sinfulness and pain, and open our hearts to share with the wounded and sinful a glimpse of God's love. If we are cooks, we must cook. If we are singers, we must sing. If we are teachers, we must teach. If we have a good bedside manner, we must sit beside the beds of those who suffer. It won't do us much good to worry about the things we can't control, but there is much we can do to invite our Jesus into our world. We call them fools, Garth Brooks continues, who have to dance within the flame, who chants the sorrow and the shame that always comes with getting burned. But you've got to be rough when consumed by desire, because it's not enough just to stand outside the fire. Amen.